Today is July 24th, 2025. It is 8:43 a.m. Central Standard Time outside of Austin. Take a moment, if you will, and just listen to the environment that I'm in. I'm outside. You can hear a variety of sounds and understand for a moment which sound is the loudest to you. As I was sitting here drinking coffee after my meditation and Qigong exercise, I was having this understanding that on my manifesting journey, I am approaching my relationship with my content differently. Last year was a big year for me, and in terms of going viral several times, not like super viral, but as a relatively new creator, I had a couple of really big hits, and it creates this sensation in the mind of wanting to grasp and wanting to hold on. And so what I did is I started creating more content that was resonating with people. And at first, this was twin flame content. And over a period of, I would say, 6 weeks or months, and I had an influx of coaching clients and people interested in me helping them with their journey. And I worked with many of those, and it was rewarding, but I could feel that there was something else missing, and that I was becoming niched down, is what they say. And if you're not familiar with content creation, it's a very similar marketing term where you niche down, and the goal is you find your audience, right? And the more you niche down, the higher probability that you're able to find your audience. Well, what happens when you have more to say than just twin flame content or just your particular area of expertise? And I started struggling with this sense of wanting to do something different, feeling like I was in a box. I know some of you can relate to this in your own way. And I started teaching about other topics, including attachment styles. And then boom, I started taking off with attachment styles. And I shifted away from the twin flame content. At first, it was an overlap. It was twin flame plus attachment styles. And then I had random people saying, what does this have to do with twin flames? And I thought to myself, you're right. Actually, attachment styles is something that is prevalent in twin flames, but it's also prevalent without the twin flame experience. It just so happens to be enhanced if you have an attachment style issue and you're on a twin flame journey, then it's magnified. So I started teaching to a different audience. And then over time, I started feeling more and more boxed in and feeling as though now I had two different boxes. And at some point, I even lost the twin flame box, and I was fully in the attachment style teachings. And then I felt like this isn't me. I don't want to teach about avoidant attachment styles for the rest of my life. This is the thing about alignment. And I'm going to get back to why I asked you to listen to the noise in a moment. There was a reason for that. And the environment. When you're thinking about your alignment and whether or not your manifested reality is working for you, the best way to frame this is, can I do this for the rest of my life? It could be a relationship, a career, a job, a business, a hobby, whatever it is, right? Can I do this for the rest of my life? If the answer is no, then that is a really great sign that you're not in alignment with your actual purpose. And you could be on a stepping stone to it, so it doesn't mean it's necessarily a mistake. And even if you perceive that it is sometimes, it's often just a learning opportunity to get you to where you're supposed to be going. And when you understand that if all you have to do is answer that one question, can I do this for the rest of my life? To check in with yourself and to understand, is my channel, is my content, is my world working for me, working for my soul? And if that's all it takes to understand your alignment, then you would want to ask yourself that frequently. And what I was finding is that I wasn't asking myself that, but I was coming to the same conclusion. I can't talk about this for the rest of my life. What am I doing? Who am I talking to? Why am I doing this? It was bringing up all of these questions. And because I had set out on a life in this direction, I manifested myself as a content creator intentionally and subconsciously, and also by accident. It was a threefold. I was doing it before I realized it was a thing. And then when I realized it was a thing, I started training myself and developing the skills to intentionally do it. And then once it started happening, I needed to make it happen more because I was supporting myself doing it. And there was no turning back. I went all in, right? But something happened where I started controlling the process. And this is what I want to share with you today. I started approaching my relationship to the algorithm as like a rat in a cage, hitting a lever and trying to get the sugar water to come out. And at some point, especially during the TikTok ban, I don't know if you're familiar with it. If not, it's not super important, but this primary vehicle for my income, for my livelihood, it for a while was the only platform I was using. The primary vehicle was suddenly gone. And when it came back, it was like my knees had been cut out from under me. And I made some strategic changes that I think played into that. But there was a shift. And then this created a sense of not really panic, because I don't experience panic in the same way since setting off on this quantum shifting and manifesting journey and awakening experience. It's not quite like that, but it's a concerted effort of realizing that your lifeline is approaching a dead end and you need to do something different. And then that's when I began really strategizing about the changes that I needed to make. What I recognize this morning very, very clearly, especially since embarking on making this content and the recent changes I've made in my social media platforms, really like dialing in my alignment. I have now shifted from the rat in the cage pressing the lever, like how do I make it work? How do I use all the strategies? How do I use the skills? Yes, all of those are important, right? But there's been a shift in my thinking of how do I become the beacon? How do I become the frequency that then attracts and manifests? And as I was sitting here drinking coffee, listening to the sounds, and you can hear a shift in the sounds, right? I hope it's picking this up. What I observed is that the cicadas here, it's summertime in Texas, and the cicadas I love. I don't know, I've always loved them since childhood, and there's a nuance to them that they kind of have a rhythm and a flow, and in other parts of the world they sound quite angry at certain times. In my quantum shifting journey, it's been a little intense, and the cicadas will even, reflect that intensity. And as I was sitting out here, I heard them so loudly that I went in to get my phone to record this message, because it sharpened my understanding that if these cicadas are in mating season and attracting other cicadas, then they need to be a beacon. And there's so many competing noises. There was the air conditioner, there was traffic, there were birds, there's, the wind rustling. And for a moment in my reality, the cicadas were almost the only thing I could hear. And when you become a beacon, like this, a concentrated force, it becomes undeniable and unmistakable that your frequency will attract your cicada mate, whatever symbolism that works for you in this analogy. It's like if you're trying to attract that thing, if you're trying to attract the person, the job, the finances, the life, the plane of existence, at some point when you have things established, you have to become the dominant vibration in your reality. And in your little section of the world, on your channel, on your whatever you're inhabiting, you have to emit such a powerful frequency that it becomes unmistakable where you're at. And when you shift your thinking to becoming a beacon versus responding to algorithms or responding to circumstances, it will change your world.